Okay, we're on the YouTube too. So, like I said, with Steve absent
Okay, we're
tonight.
on the YouTube too.
Oh, let me hang on just a second. Uh, Shut off my YouTube here so I don't hear myself 30 seconds later like Max Headroom. And with Steve not here tonight, we won't get a museum update, and we won't have a tour of an item in the museum. So it's basically going to be a book club without the book, and we can all sit around and hopefully all have a drink of a favorite beverage, and we can shoot the breeze for whatever anyone would like. And with that, I will turn it over to the group.
I got mine.
Okay. You're way ahead of me. I got a bowl of soup for dinner. I got to go and grab that, and maybe I'll follow your example for the remainder of the meeting. Mike, you want to tell us about the anything progress on the newsletter, how things are going, what we can do to help you?
Unmuted here. I'm starting to get an occasional response with some people who want to volunteer some things, so that's good. And at least for December, the two editors are going to be helping Santa test tubes for all of his TV sets. So we're just going to do a little short newsletter for December, and then get back to things for real in January.
Mhm.
And I noticed, I don't know if it had something to do with Steve not being available, but at least I didn't get the email saying that the newsletter was out, and it was out on, I guess it was Tuesday. Steve put it on, but I'd like to know if anyone else, if anyone got the notice that the newsletter was out or not. But
I didn't know it was out.
No.
I spoke with Steve after I talked to you, Mike, and
Hmm.
he said that he did send that out. So,
Well, he
and
sent out the newsletter, just not the notice that the newsletter was available, the bulk email.
he said he did. Now I'm gonna have to go back and see whether
Okay.
did anybody else get it? Everybody's shaking their head no. Okay, well, I talked to him, and he's he's still around. In fact, he updated the website, he put everything on there, and he told me he
Yeah.
sent the newsletter out. I'll check with him tomorrow, and we'll see what's up. So you're
Another
saying,
thing I
like,
wanted to say about the new homepage on the website,
yeah,
or I guess I don't know how new it is, but maybe it's just me, but to find where home is, I never realized that that little logo on the top is the home page. Um,
yeah,
so
that's
if
kind of a convention, I think, but yeah.
and home is in small print there, and bigger print would be nice. Maybe I'd have recognized it sooner.
Or we'll get you some new reading glasses.
Yeah, there you go.
Um, the I got a pair of cheap Chinese reading glasses online the other day, and I figured, for $2, I'll give them a try. They're actually variable focus reading glasses. So if I'm sitting here and I'm looking at something up close, or if I'm looking further away towards my computer screen,
Yeah.
just kind of go like that. It's not bifocals. There's no distance. It's all reading, but it's a progressive
Wow.
focus. Yeah, and it's made out of plastic, and it cost $1.98 or something. And I'll be damned, it worked.
Wow. I have to check that out.
Yeah, we'll get you one for Christmas. Um, yeah, so you're saying, Mike, that the newsletter went out. You know this how, and
I only know it went out because I went to the website and clicked on it. But the it's the
oh,
bulk email saying it is there that didn't
gotcha.
go out.
Okay, so what Steve may have meant, when he told me that, was that he put it on the
Right.
website. Okay, all right. Well, we're making this up as we go along.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's great. Great effort that you're putting into that. You know, that's something that for 30 years, I guess we've been maybe thinking about that or not thinking about it, and then here, as if by magic, it's you know, a really a good looking newsletter. So
And yet it only feels like I've been doing it for 30 years. So,
yeah, yeah, yep. Um, so I'm trying to think that I don't know if I have any updates from the museum from talking to Steve. There's you know, there's succession planning going on, trying to get the board of directors to take on various roles, or at least to apprentice to various roles that Steve's doing. As he says, I'm 80 now, so he's trying to offload some of his responsibilities. But we've been talking about that for about 30 years too. But it's becoming, you know, more and more. You know, the light at the end of the tunnel. We're not quite sure what it is, but we figure we better at least make some plans. There's no plans for the museum to move to new location yet. That was briefly discussed a year ago, and there's it's on everybody's to-do list to keep on top with it, but there's nothing. The city hasn't even thought about it since they mentioned it, let alone offering us anything that would make us want to do that.
to interrupt you for a second, the the email for the newsletter had something passed through from the town to Steve to talk about that. So I don't know if that's something he's followed up on or not, but at least there's someone with a spark of interest about it.
Okay, yeah, it's a big ask on their part and on our part, because you know, nobody wants to get into a big expensive thing, and nobody wants to get shortchanged. So it would take a lot of assurances and guarantees, and a lot of you know, a lot to be offered to the museum to you know, abandon what we've got and go someplace else if we
Right.
didn't have certain guarantees. And if, you know, for the city, they're obviously trying to figure this out with the builders, I guess, that are you know, rehabilitating the whole downtown area, which they're doing a great job on. But I'm sure the city doesn't want to be on the hook for anything either. They're going to get it. You know, we're going to be like street art. They're going to write it into a contract somewhere, and that's going to be what happens, if anything happens. Um, the the plans for new or updated display areas at the museum are all being discussed. That's a big topic lately. The the new people, such as they are, and there are a fair number of new people that have kind of come into the hobby lately, many of which who haven't found us, the Early Television Museum, yet. They're not necessarily interested in scanning disc TVs or pre-war sets, at least not primarily, or at least that's not what's going to draw them in. They might get a kick out of a 50s black and white set. They probably don't really care about the early color that much. But what they do care about is increasingly is the post 1960 or even post 1970 stuff. So although none of us are necessarily particularly interested in that, we are going to cater to that, starting with the predicted display, which worked out real well. People really like the predicted display, and we're going to get into, you know, some of the wood grain sets and the black plastic crepe sets and all the things that are evoking memories from people's childhoods now, and put that into a maybe a small permanent display area and or a small rotating display area, you know, featuring different themes. And from my rapidly fading memory, that's about what I got from the things that we talked about most recently, you know, Steve and I. And if anybody knows anything else, if anybody else has any thoughts on that, that wouldn't be a bad thing to discuss. How does this bunch of balding and graying old timers feel about a set of wood grain televisions on display at the museum?
That would be great. I'd be happy even to contribute to that for my
Okay.
collection.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say there should be no shortage of them, but I guess with everything else, as things start to become collectible, after most of them have been thrown out. So it's only after people save this stuff in a little bit and say, hey, this stuff is old. I mean, hell, sets from the 90s, they're getting old now. Well, that was almost 10 years ago, wasn't it?
I've noticed that a lot of these people that are younger are really into video games, and they like seeing that displayed. We have in Texas, we have a Pong. Well, it's an Atari machine, but it just does Pong, and
Mhm.
people actually go in the room it's in and sit there and play the thing. And they really seem to really like it for some reason. We did a 70s room that's got a quadraphonic stereo and a 25-inch RCA TV that you would probably, you would have thrown away a few years ago, and a Betamax and a VHS machine and some other stuff like that. And people seem to really relate to that for some reason. So, I just thought it was junk personally, but there
Well,
you go.
we've all been doing this for, the 30 years at the museum, and then 30-year-old stuff is antique now. So things we couldn't have invested in when we started might have, they've taken their place.
This is stuff I had.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm looking at stuff that I've thrown out myself that, I said, oh, that'll never be anything worth keeping. And people are, sort of lusting after these now. I just found a PVM, 25-inch PVM, Sony PVM monitor in my storage unit the other day. And I said, oh, look at that. That was, reluctantly cast aside at the end of the SD era. And now all of a sudden that's a scarce, valuable commodity. Go figure. The there was there's a new quote. I don't know how formal it is, but there's a broadcast museum that opened a little while ago. I think it's in Toronto, and I mentioned your museum to them, Chuck, because it's and I didn't give them your phone number or anything, but I mentioned the museum. So if they take the initiative to reach out to you, they can find you. And if they ask me, I'll put them in touch with you. But it's two guys with I don't know, with a big room or something rented in a building, and they're starting a modest but pretty ambitious operation. And
Yeah, guys, it's funny. I'm actually in Toronto now, and I visited the museum on Tuesday. It's very nice.
This is the Hamza or the or
This is the MZTV Museum.
Yep. No, I'm talking about a different one. I've never been up there to MZ, if I might correct you. But,
Okay, right.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. But the I've never been up there, but I've seen pictures online, and it's certainly an ambitious museum that they've put together. I think ours is better, but they put together a hell of an operation up there. But this is a new thing. It's more like the Broadcast Museum in New Hampshire, or nothing as grand as Chuck's operation down in Texas, but it's all broadcast. I guess it's primarily broadcast recorders right now. I don't really know, but it was specifically on television broadcast as opposed to television reception, which is quite the niche.
Is this the guy that calls himself Hamza Betamax on
Yeah.
Facebook? Yeah.
Yep. And
he's always looking for videotape machines.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Yes, he is. I've offered him a few things, and I guess my offerings were meager enough that he was going to come down here, but he hasn't never gotten around to it yet. But you can't fault his enthusiasm, that's for sure. I was intimidated by trying to keep broadcast machinery running when I was doing that for a living. And I always gave it to the guy. I had a guy to fix it for me all the time. And the number of repairs that I did myself on Betacam or on a broadcast 3-Plimicon camera were vanishingly rare, because, like I said, I was both perplexed and intimidated by what was going on inside there. And then now these guys are here 40 years later. They're jumping in there, and half the time it sounds like they maybe know a little bit about what they're doing, maybe not, but they're not intimidated to jump in, and some of them are actually getting results, resurrecting this stuff. So God bless them.
Sometimes you have to bow to enthusiasm. I mean, that really works. There's a group in San Antonio, Texas, that's trying to get a museum, radio, TV, broadcast museum together. They've got their 501c3 status and they have a board of directors and all that, and they're looking on a building, oddly, a old car dealership, which strikes home with me since that's what we're in. Uh, and I've told them that as soon as they get their building, bring a truck and some strong guys with, weak minds, strong backs. I can fix you right up. So.
Yeah, there's usually no shortage of donations. I know that there's the hell's the name of the place near Pittsburgh? It's a computer museum. I'm drawing a blank right now. Large scale integration museum, something like that. And they came down to InfoAge one time with a box truck, and I gave Matt Patteray all my U-matic stuff and my old edit controllers and a bunch of monitors and whatnot. And so they got the computer museum and a video museum going on there now, and no shortage of donations, that's for sure. But I wish I'd have kept those VO 2860s. They were my first ones. They're kind of cute. Those are Sony recorders, but he probably took them up there and threw them out. But yeah, I told the guy, I don't remember the fellow's name, but he's not Hamza, he's the other guy. I just sent him a note and I said, just speaking from, a little bit of experience, I said it's going to cost more. It's going to be ridiculously difficult trying to keep volunteers on hand to keep the place open, and just be careful what you do. But it's pretty neat that they're actually trying to do it. I probably would have done that if I could too, even knowing that it's going to cost more than you think and that it's going to be impossible to keep the place staffed.
Well, the idea is to die broke for a starter, and it's a big deal, and be careful what you ask for because you may get it. We find stuff on our doorstep periodically. I mean, that's pretty common actually. We don't even know where it came from. So
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm sure early television gets the same thing. So
No, I guess not so much because it's not open all the time. But I guess, yeah, Steve says we have to turn stuff away occasionally. Down at InfoAge, I know that people come by and they want to give us stuff. And when we as politely as we possibly could say, no, we don't need a black plastic TV or another broken 1930s radio, or they get mad. They get really offended sometimes. It's a high wire act trying to balance being nice there, and you don't want to be rude to people because then you get a reputation for that. People won't bring you the good stuff. They'll find some Marconi stuff and they'll say, oh, those guys are assholes, we don't want to do that. So you got to be you got to walk the thin line.
well, nobody's baby is ugly, that's something you got to remember. So sometimes you just got to grin and bear it and take the stuff. I know I was sitting there, and we're only open a couple days a week, but people will leave stuff on the front door because we're in and out a lot. I was sitting there thinking, gee, it's going to be a slow Saturday morning, and somebody with a pickup truck with a flatbed trailer pulls in our parking lot. I'm going, God, I hope that's not for us.
And
It was.
Yeah.
But luckily, it was some pretty cool stuff, but there's a bunch of junk in it too.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you got to take the wheat with the chaff, I guess, or the chaff with the wheat.
Hey,
Mike,
Dave, you got to say to yourself, it's a little less intimidating to try to fix stuff that someone gave you than when you were in the business and trying to fix something that was very, very expensive. And if
Yeah.
you
Well,
slipped a little bit, that was it.
I'll give you a story. And if I bore anybody, just start yelling at me. But had a brand new Betacam machine, my first Betacam machine. Kind of mortgaged the ranch for that and put that in. And a client came in, the one who had been urging me to upgrade to Betacam. I'm talking a while ago now, and he took a mini Betacam tape and stuck it in the machine, but he didn't do it quite straight, and the elevator mechanism died. And we had a deadline, of course, of the next day to have his program done, and this was now 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. I'm still sitting, I'm looking at this, trying to figure out what the hell to do. But this was in the olden days when customer service was good, and I guess when Sony customer service was stellar, because I actually called customer service, and I guess it was probably about 10 o'clock at night when I gave up. I called customer service. I got the on-call guy to call me back, and he said, "You got an Anton Bauer brick battery around?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "All right." He says, "I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to tell you how to take the elevator mechanism out of the Betacam machine, put the tape in without it, and weight it down with an Anton Bauer brick so that the machine will work." And that got me through. I think we had to wait until that project was done, and I put the tape in with the battery on top of it until I was able to send the machine out for service. But that was the good old days, I guess. And yes, that was pretty intimidating. So, Mike, did you put it in the newsletter, or would you like to maybe tell us a little bit about the exhibit that you're part of out in Bethlehem?
Oh yeah, it's the
I
National
haven't been there
Museum,
yet. Yeah.
National Museum of Industrial History, and they made an arrangement with the IEEE, and I had donated some Armstrong pieces for this exhibit, and they had some of their own and some that were donated by other people. And traveling display is parked there in Bethlehem till April, and they got their own room to put this in. And if I knew you were going to ask, I'd brought in some of the pictures of it. But they did it. It's a really classy job, and it was mostly financed by a grandson of Howard Armstrong's wife. And from the way he was dressed, I guess he has money to spend. And so he originally made this donation before the pandemic. And then, like everything else, it went on hold for that whole period of time. And then they got it together again. And I think from there it's going to San Antonio. But sometime I hope to get some of my collection back. But the main piece is a prototype superhet that Armstrong's assistant Harry Houck built when they were trying to scale down the superhets from an 8-tube to a 6-tube, and that to make it cost effective in 1924, because the 199 tubes that they were using were in the neighborhood of $5 each, and at a time when some people's pay was $5 a day. So the end result is what Houck did was a trick that they called reflexing back then, where you have some of the tubes do double duty as RF and AF amplifiers. And the trick worked, but to make it work, he had to expand the range of the IF frequency up higher, so there wasn't like a crosstalk between the IF frequencies were very low those days, just above audible. And so that was what Houck did. And at the time, RCA was busy making Armstrong one of the richest men in America. So he was not the type to take credit for it. He made the patent for that idea go through in Houck's name. And when Houck put it all through, Armstrong said, "Well, we want all the patents in the same portfolio." So in 1924, he gave him $100,000 for the patent rights to be switched over to him, and it was added to the portfolio that RCA got. So Armstrong was happy, RCA was happy, and Harry Houck must have been very happy. And one of the three pieces that were made for that to demonstrate it, one went to Sarnoff's house, one went to Owen Young's house. He was the president of General Electric, and Harry Houck kept one. And there's a picture of Armstrong in a publicity shot, and he's actually touching pointing at the one that I have. for this publicity shot. So, yeah, there's the piece about the exhibit. See if it, do they have a picture of that one display that I'm talking about?
Is it any of this?
No, that's a Regiola 24. That's
Yeah.
one of the things I donated, but that's not the one I'm talking about.
No, that's all we got.
But anyway, it's a pretty neat museum. That's the only exhibit of small stuff. They're into big, giant steam engine kind of things from the steel mills that were there, and but this one room off to the side is all about the early radio days.
So I missed the very beginning. Is Steve MIA today?
Yeah, Steve had a family issue come up that unexpectedly, so he said he was not going to be able to be on tonight. Sends his regrets.
Also, this year I'm working on a paper for the Antique Wireless Association about Dumont. And if anyone on the Zoom tonight has any interesting pictures or something that whether it's ads for Dumont stuff or a Dumont picture of a TV that's unusual, if you send it to the newsletter email, I'd like to take a look at it, see if I could use it.
What else could people help you with for the newsletter, Mike?
Oh, for the newsletter, pretty much. I'd love to get some more of my favorite TVs, stories about a restoration you might have done with some pictures. For in the upcoming months, well, the one this month has the National Capital Radio and TV Museum, just a few pages and pictures to give people an idea of some other place you might want to go to take a tour of a museum. And well, their bio on if it's interesting things about their career that want to put out there. So pretty much anything to not, I'm not saying that to take up space, but to have things that I don't have to write or edit so much myself and can just include them in. And there's a lot of talented guys out there. You guys can help me out here.
Yeah, and give a wider perspective too, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a narrow vision sometimes.
Anybody else do anything interesting lately? Anything activity or anything in your collection? Any success stories? Any fail stories that are interesting?
Dave, it's Dave Arland. I wanted to say a couple things tonight.
Hey,
The light's not very good here, so I'll just turn this on for a second. First of all, Mike, thanks for mentioning the National Capital Radio and TV Museum. We have a guest with us tonight. Gary Arland is with us. I just noticed he and I are not related, even though we're commonly thought to be related. And Gary is a docent there in Bowie, Maryland, which is just outside of Washington. And they just celebrated their 25th anniversary. So I just wanted to let people know Gary's on the call. And Gary, maybe you'd like to say a word about the museum.
that is a first-class museum. I've been there. That is really a great place.
He's here, but he may not be here.
He might be trying to put his microphone on.
Well, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that I'm going to throw up an image here. Tomorrow is actually the anniversary of the 21 CT55, which is the second RCA color television, which came down the production line in Bloomington for the first time on December 1st, 1954. And this set that's on the right there, that is one that Blake Hinkle sold to me about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, and it had been at Raytheon. You can see the picture here in the middle. The back was all cut up because somebody was trying to power a rectangular tube from the chassis in this monster. Wanted to thank Tom Carlson, who did a chassis restoration for me. The folks at Antiquity Furniture Restoration, who worked on the TRK9 a couple of years ago, they did the work on the cabinet. And Ed Milborn, you can see up here, helping me with convergence. So snapped this picture of Spock and the Romulan commander a couple weeks ago. So it is up and amongst the living again, thanks to a lot of people who have been contributors at the museum. So wanted to mark that anniversary tonight.
Have you ever seen anything on the production numbers on those? How many were made?
Estimated about 3,000. So there are 25 or so that are on the museum's roster. So it's actually a rarer set than is the CT100. And there's some suggestion that it may have been sort of a developmental set to see, how to get things going, speed things up a bit, get to a bigger picture tube. Wayne, I see you here as well. I think this image from the catalog actually came from Wayne that's on the early TV Museum website. So thank you for loaning that as well.
I don't know if I've contributed to the list or not, but I've got a 21 CT55 that belonged originally to Como Television up in Seattle. They used it for, I guess, a monitor in a sitting room or something for guests and such. And it's got Como stamped on the back of it, but it's in pretty good shape as I remember.
That's great. Well, you got to check the list that's on the museum website, because there's a chassis list there. So maybe it's already registered. Mine wasn't. It is now. But kind of a cool thing to bring back to life.
I don't think it's registered. I've got a bunch of stuff on there, but I need to go over a lot of my stuff because I see things on there. I say, well, I've got one of those, and my name isn't on the list there. So, it's getting cold out there. It's like 30 degrees out there tonight. It's too cold to get in one of my warehouses there and pull stuff out because it's probably landlocked in the middle of it, among other stuff.
Mine's right near the door of the storage, but that's not quite good enough. I'll have to check if mine's on the list, but I found mine in the strangest possible way, maybe. Somebody put an ad on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace for a CT100 first color TV for $100. So I hurried up for that, but actually when I looked at the ad again, I called the guy and I said, well, that's not a CT100, but it is a very collectible set. And he said, well, it was in the house when I moved here. I just want to get rid of it quick. So we worked a deal.
If you bought it for $100, that's a pretty good price, Dave.
I was ashamed to buy it for $100. I upped the price.
Here you can see it in a control room. I'm not sure if this is in New York or where, but here on the left side, from 1955, 56 timeframe. Anyway, it's these things are always, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. But for the moment, mine's working again, so that's good news.
Somebody put up on Facebook the other day that they were lucky enough to just get a Predicta, 21-inch Predicta Holiday. And they were asking the group for advice. They wanted to restore it and use it as their main TV, their daily driver. So yeah, the 2 pieces of advice that they got real quick were, that's probably not the best TV to do for your first restoration. And you probably don't want to use that regularly every day.
And take plenty of pictures while it is working.
Yeah.
Seems like on on Facebook there, people ask for information and how do I restore it? And you say, oh, you just put 3 tubes in it and it's done. I guess that's what they're hoping for, but It's a little deeper than that, I'm afraid.
Well, somebody cut the line cord off and I'm looking for a new line cord so I can use it. Yeah.
There was somebody on Facebook asking about line cords or something. They didn't understand. I'm still not understanding what they were asking, but they were wanting a line cord like it was something exotic. Some newbies here, they just haven't got a clue, I suppose.
Yeah. Dave, I saw Gary Arlen on here before, but it looks like he may have left. I see James O'Neill on. I don't know if James, if
Yep.
you'd be willing to jump on and talk about the museum. I know you're connected with the museum down there. And I'm putting you on the spot, but if you don't want to jump on, that's okay too. Or if you're out in Arkansas and the internet's not cooperating, that's fine too.
Well, I've been there a couple times, so I can jump in and just say, if you're ever in the Washington, D.C. area, again, it's actually just south of the BWI airport. So sort of between Baltimore and Washington, just to the east of that. It's in a little Victorian house, which doesn't sound like much, but the products that they have on display, it's a rotating thing, it's radio and television, rival what we have in Ohio. Things are in really good shape, and we've really looked to them to, as Mike has done the newsletter, and as there have been increased communications, because they're really good about communicating with their members. Last thing I would say is I stopped by the Ohio Museum a few weeks ago. I just needed a snapshot of the control panel for the 21CT55 because mine, I didn't have the right pencil box. Had the right box, but it didn't have the right graphic. Anyway, the board chairman of the Bowie Museum was there taking a tour with Steve. So hopefully, we all will get out and see each other's places, because the one in Maryland is really good.
Is there a website for them?
Yes, there is.
Could you-
National
Could you
Capital.
post it? Could you
Sure.
put it in the chat?
I will. Yes, Wayne, I'll do
Thank
that right.
you.
Contact info's on the newsletter too.
I put a little display. Did it come through on the screen? I put some pictures up that I took when I was there. I can't tell if that's working. No.
No, we're seeing your YouTube.
Yeah. Huh. Okay.
One thing they do that I think is really cool is they have restoration classes. They actually have organized classes on how to fix some of this stuff. I think that's a pretty good idea, although good luck finding somebody you can teach that. That's beyond my it's not in my wheelhouse, but I think it would be really great to do that kind of stuff.
It's it's I don't know anything about it other than what they've sent out. It's a pretty serious, ambitious program. It's like very small classes, and I think it's $100 or a couple of $100 to sign up for it. So it's not a get together on a Saturday afternoon and goof around. It sounds pretty serious.
No, they charge for it, but it's not crazy prices or anything. It's just, I guess, to cover the expenses. But it just seems like a really good idea, because a lot of this stuff, the next generation has no idea. They never even seen a tube, and they don't realize what they're getting into on a lot of the stuff. Just like you say with the people who say, I just bought a new Philco Predicta. I got it in my house. I need a new line cord for it because somebody cut the old one off, Sounds like trouble brewing to me.
Is this coming through?
Yeah. Could you go back to the beginning? Because there are some pictures where I want to ask, what is that?
Well, I don't necessarily remember. Yeah. This was just a particularly nice display that they put together.
Yeah, what were those RCA boxes, those gray boxes? I've never seen one of those before.
Yeah, what is that?
Well, serial number
Oh, I-
9, whatever that
I
is.
try to take pictures of the little cards that they put with these things too, because I never remember, but I don't. Well, it's a type SQGL, so wonder what Google might have to say about that.
I see something on the right that says demonstrator or
I'm
something there.
gonna assume that's the little
No,
badge
it's
that's behind the
something
card.
else. Oh, yeah, I see that.
Yeah, but a lot of the old radio equipment. I don't know. That's a um, 1920s. But they have a very small but nicely done television display there, or they did at that point in time. All the obligatory sets, I guess, except well, where's the Pilot TV? Got to have that too.
I'm pretty sure they have one.
Uh, I don't know what the hell that is.
That's a mechanical set.
Is that one of Peter Yancey's on the right there? And they're really good about having a rotating displays. This was a very, very in-depth display on this guy. I mean, really in-depth that I'd never heard of. And they swap these out seasonally.
Hey, Dave.
Hello.
One interesting thing I've seen in the pictures that I have, and are on the newsletter, and in this picture, is they have seating around. That if the docent's speaking about something, you can take a load off, and not like in the in Ohio there where it's pretty much stand up and look.
Yeah, we have a lot of chairs in the Texas Broadcast Museum, and people use them too because they go, well, first of all, I didn't know it was this big, or that a tour was going to take an hour and a half or something. So a lot of people do sit down, and that actually helps a lot.
Oh, that picture you're showing there, that's showing Pick Temple.
Yep.
I was born in Washington, D.C., and I remember he had a kind of a cowboy show, kind of like Howdy Doody, sort of. And he had a peanut gallery, and he'd have children on it.
Yep.
And he'd seat them up on a saddle, on a fake horse or a saddle there, and it had all of these buttons all over it. And he'd say, "Pick a button." He'd go, and they'd play a cartoon or something with it. But yeah, Pick Temple was a children's program show there, and coming out of Washington.
Maybe we'll have to get somebody from that museum and take a month here and tell us about all their good stuff, because it really is good stuff. Auto radios. So very imaginative displays that they put together in a very small space.
Hey, Dave, can you stop on one that has some cone speakers? Oh, there you're catching some now.
Oh, all right.
Uh,
This one.
No, one more, there you go. Most of the cone speakers that exist now were all restored because the paper cones had about disappeared, and the man who did almost all of them, Buford Chittister, passed away just recently. So cone speakers that he did an amazing job of researching the paper, making silk screens if they all had patterns on them. And he would do all this work. You'd tell him what you needed for your speaker, and you're thinking that you're going to actually compensate him for his time, but he'll say $40 or $30. And he was just doing it to help restore these speakers. There's a great collector's books on cone speakers that he and his late wife had put together. If you see it in a collector's book display, it's worth picking up just for the pictures.
Do you know if he passed along his skills to anyone else?
He he would just say things like, "Oh, this is easy. I just researched this and that." So it's like, okay, that's enough. Like now we know. But that, I mean, I'm not saying he painted any of these speakers, but that's one on the wall there. That's a radio speaker. And the selling point was to do something that didn't make it look like an ugly speaker cone sitting on top of your radio cabinet.
Yeah, do I understand the principle of the driver on these? Because
It was like a lever action, they called it, where the
that's
center of
what
the
I was
cone
going to
was
say, a
attached to.
lever.
Yeah, the magnet is pulling on the lever, and that's moving the cone in and out.
That
So,
painted
the-
speaker on the wall there kind of reminds me of old popular science magazines from the 60s, where they would show like a flat screen TV on the wall. That this is, people say, how are they ever going to do that? And kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, Mike, you just reminded me go ahead. You just reminded me, Mike, we lost somebody else just very recently too. I was going to send my RCA 77 microphone down to ENAC, Clarence Kane down in South Jersey. And he's gone now. He apprenticed somebody, a younger guy who's apparently got all the tooling and all the equipment and is continuing the business of refurbishing the old RCA microphones.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
There's a guy out west, and I think he's in Arizona, Steve. His dad designed the BK10 microphone, and he calls himself uh, Talking Dog Studios or something, and he can refurbish microphones.
Well, I was up in Wisconsin. What was the museum up there? I can't remember the fellow's name now.
Yeah, Bob Paquette.
Bob Paquette, what a character, what a lovely guy. And he actually showed me how they re-ribboned the ribbon microphones. And it certainly took a lot of skill, but it was not high tech at all. I mean, they just had a little set of gears there. They ran the aluminum through to corrugate it, and then they basically just stuck it in the microphone. And that was as high tech as it got.
That set of gears that he had was something for back around the turn of the century when they would launder men's shirts. They would not perfect. What's the word? Ruffle you run the collar through it and give it the ruffle effect. He found one of those at a state sale or something like that, and he said, "I wonder if I can do aluminum with that." Sure enough, it's kind of sad about his microphone collection. He was a wonderful guy, and at least once a week I'd have conversations with him for at least an hour. We'd discuss stuff. And bless his heart, after he passed away, his son contacted me and he was trying to give me first choice on all of the microphones, but it was an outrageous price. Then he came back and I thought, well, I could possibly afford that, but what am I going to do? You take all my savings account. But that recording engineer up in Oregon, that woman, I forget her name up there, but she bought all that stuff. And they're selling parts of it on eBay for the most outrageous prices you've ever seen. And the guy that's up there told me this. It's, yeah, they're outrageous, but he says, when we hit one, we hit a sweet one.
Hey, Dave, can you go back to that glass cabinet that had about 6 speakers in it?
Give me a second. Glass cabinet.
It was about 5 back from where you stopped.
I had shut the page down. I'm just kind of, I got, that one.
Before this one? There's only speakers in it.
I've got pretty much everything.
No?
No, not yet.
That one, I'm going forward now. No, that's the last one. So this
Yeah,
is,
so go maybe 6 or 7 back.
there you go.
That's the one. So that speaker in this second one up on the left-hand side, that's a Victor before RCA merged in uh, tabletop speaker, and that's a paper pleated cone. And he actually made replicas of that, and how he did it, I don't know. But a lot of times the paper was on some of them was half dissolved, and he even made a little logo that could go in the dead center of it. That you would never know it was a replica. So that's how intricate some of his work got to be.
Yeah, I was talking to Buford about getting a speaker made. I have a 1917 aircraft radio that came with or without a speaker. And unfortunately, the one that I found came without the speaker. But he said, yeah, no problem. But, I only saw him, once every other year at Kutztown and missed the boat.
You say this guy's name is Chichester and his first name was Buford?
Buford Chidester, Chidester, I believe.
Yep.
He was in York, Pennsylvania.
Thanks.
And you got this, if anybody didn't get there, that was just beyond belief. This place was utterly wild. We can't have him come on because this is all scattered to the winds, but he had a hell of a lot more than microphones there. I think my favorite exhibit that he had was a full-scale replica in one room of a B-17 radio room.
Wow.
Now, not many museums are going to be that ambitious. And he had it outfitted with all the proper stuff.
There was a guy in Nashville, Tennessee named Pony Maples, and he designed munitions for the government and such, and is a wealthy man, lived practically next door to the governor, but he had a museum in his house, and he had an actual part of a fuselage of one of those fighter planes there that was intact, and I think it had another aircraft in there. It had a Packard engine in it, and quite a display. But unfortunately, he passed away some years ago, and I haven't heard. But he also collected radios and had many good stories to tell.
I heard a story just the other day that there's an actual branch of science, and I forget what it's called now, but they did failure, I guess it's failure analysis. They did failure analysis of the planes from back in World War II. And the crews would come back in the planes. I never realized that the skin on those planes was thick aluminum foil. There really wasn't much to it. And they'd come back and they'd figure out where all the bullet holes were. And they started out reinforcing those areas on the plane, the next batch of planes that they would send out, until some genius figured out that the ones with all the bullet holes in them were the ones that survived, and where the planes that didn't come back had the bullet holes in a different area. So they figured out that if they reinforced the areas that didn't have the bullet holes, they had a much higher survival rate. And I just thought that was the most amazing story.
What many other people don't know about those fighter planes is that the engines were not designed for longevity. They only figured they'd be good for around 1,000 hours before major overhaul, because they thought that they wouldn't last that long in a war zone anyway. So they didn't build them extremely high quality like they have to do now.
May say something about the life of the pilots too.
Yeah, I think it was
But,
25 missions and you got to go home, but most people didn't make it to 25.
yeah, that reminds me of what we thought of the different divisions at Motorola. The military stuff had to be absolutely reliable when first turned on and last through one mission. The consumer stuff had to work in much less severe conditions, but had to last 20 years. And the automotive stuff had to be better than either the consumer or the military because it had to last 10 years and in an environment that was as bad as the military environment.
I have about a half a dozen of those iconoscope cameras that they built during World War II that RCA designed. And they were for use in the aircrafts that they were going to use as our answer to the Japanese kamikazes. Surely most of you remember those surplus cameras that came on the market many years ago.
I was hoping to
You wouldn't
find a
have the
picture of
lens
that
for
little
one, would you?
machine here that does the ribbons.
Geez, and to think I had a chance to buy all of those.
Mhm. We're never going to see anything like that again.
No,
It just take a couple of million out of your petty cash drawer, and you could have had that.
$300,000 is what all of that was offered to me for. You could have made a lot of money on it, but it was a collection that should not be broken up into pieces. He started collecting all of that stuff in 1950.
Hmm.
So he was finding stuff that people were throwing away in trash cans back then that nobody thought anything about.
Hey, Julian, you don't happen to have an extra lens for one of those iconoscope cameras, do you?
Uh, you never find an extra one, but the lenses on those were not very much anyway. The ones, if you're lucky enough to find one that's intact, it has like a, like the rear window defogger in your car, the hairline stuff in it. They had a lens cap that went on top of it that it looked like a heating element on it, which is essentially what it was. And that was if it fogged up or anything. And I think I've got one of those, but in fact, I was stumbled over one the other day. I've got a half a dozen of them, various buildings that I've got, and I have one with an image orthicon in it. It was one of the last ones that they built, and they didn't build many of them. But anyway, the success of those bombers was very poor. In fact, many people don't know that John F. Kennedy's older brother was killed in one of those aircraft because what they would do, they'd had to have a live pilot take the aircraft, up in the air and fly it up there, and then he'd bail out. Well, the aircraft blew up before he could get out. And that's an interesting story, but that's fact.
I've got one of the cameras that doesn't have the lens. I used to have one when I was in high school, and I actually think I threw the lens away because I used it with my father's 500-watt slide projector. You focus that on the target of the image orthicon tube, or iconoscope tube rather, and that was just about the right amount of light. They were not exactly what you call sensitive.
I was first exposed to those type of cameras back in 1962. We lived in Seattle, Washington. My dad was transferred up there, and we lived up there on Queen Anne Hill. And I met a guy named Norman Ahlquist, one of the most brilliant minds I think I've ever seen. And anyway, he actually designed and built an image orthicon camera that was patterned like a TK11 when he was 16 years, well, actually when he started on when he's 15 years old. And I have that camera today. I was able to get it from him a few years ago. But anyway, he had one of those military surplus cameras. And at the time, he had a lens off of an old Kodachrome camera, or that had the bellows on it. You know, you pull out and unscrew the lens off of it. And it worked pretty good there for that type of lens. And anyway, I was hoping I'd get that camera from him, that military unit, but he said he sold it in at a yard sale one day, but he kept the camera that he built. And in fact, the guy named Mark, he did something on Facebook. Can't even think of it, but he did a thing on Norman Ahlquist, because Norman won the science fair contest there, the national thing there, and he was sent to New York and Albuquerque, New Mexico there back in 1963. And there was a newspaper article about it, and this guy out in California just happened to show a picture and just showing, said he was 16 years old. And I said, I think I can help you out on this. I said, I've got that camera, and Norman's still living up in Seattle, Washington, and I can hook you guys up. And he finally did a splash there on it. I just need more room in my warehouses.
Warehouses, goodness.
I have 4 of them. I think I total of about 12,000 square feet, and I have pathways in it, sadly. Oh, if you want to see, actually, I was going to suggest that if they ever did one of these meetings, that they might show an interview that a friend of mine in Atlanta did on me. Just Google my name, Julian Burke, and you'll see a drop down there. If half of those things it's me, but there's one that says early television. And the picture they show there is kind of a yellow and black thing there. It's real easy to find. But just Google that, and you'll get to see about 20% of what I've got. You see all kinds of interesting stuff there, but he said that's all I could do in an hour. It's about an hour and 4 minutes long. But I've got a lot of crap. They were showing a lot of the TV sets there in that house there up in Washington. I'm thinking, I have one of those. And that speaker, I said, yeah, I got one of those too. And the only thing I'm really looking for that I'd really like to have is a TRK-12 or an early one of those. I had a chance to get one from Harry Poster there one time, but at the time, and then when what's his name passed away up in Chicago, he had one, and I almost bought that one, and that one came from an engineer up in Camden, New Jersey. But instead, I bought 3 CT100s from him instead of that TRK-12. I was an idiot. I should have bought that TRK-12 because it had far more historical significance than those CT100s did. Although of the 3, one of them is a working set, which is still in my living room now. But I've got another CT100 I might let go of or something. How many do you really need in your collection,
I think Dave's TRK-12 in Chicago was the highest price that was ever realized for a TRK-12. So
I had a chance to buy that one for $8,000.
I think it went for 50% more than that at the auction, but I don't know.
And then there was, what's his name up in New Jersey that used to advertise an Antique Radio Classified. I'm getting where I can't recall names real quick, but geez, I can't even think of it. He used to have them occasionally. They were back about 25, 30 years ago.
Hey, Dave, I've got to drop off, but I just wanted to thank you for pinch hitting today.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing, Mike. You always got something good for us.
I'm working on it. Take care.
Okay.
Hey, Chuck, you ought to come up to Knoxville sometime and bring at least a van with a trailer, perhaps.
Oh, no. I have too much crap too. trying to figure out where to put. We got our friend Paul Beck from the Museum of Broadcast Technology gathered a just a crapper load of stuff and brought it to us about 2 months ago. I mean, it was a 26-foot Penske truck with 10,000 pounds of stuff in there. A lot of it really good stuff too. And we're still going through it. I mean, it's going to take forever. Just and more stuff keeps coming in all the time. It's really kind of scary.
And I think he sent me an email about some stuff that he had that they wanted to get rid of. And I got those Norelco cameras that I think belong to the Boston Pop, Arthur Fiedler's. I think Arthur Fiedler owned those cameras, the Boston Pops. And anyway, I got 4 of them, complete camera chains from them at one time, and some other goodies.
Well, these came from WGBH and some sports production company, all Ikegami's, and they're NTSC 16:9 cameras, which is, we got 8 of them. Didn't come with pedestals, but we had enough pedestals to where that wasn't a problem. We got switchers, camera control units, everything, tons of cable, a whole bunch of monitors, a bunch of Ikegami monitors with 1993 dates on them that were brand new in the box, never been opened before. I felt kind of guilty about opening the box and taking them out. But these were pretty high dollar pieces of equipment. And I don't know, Paul's as bad as you are about gathering stuff up, I guess. But anyway, it was very nice of him to bring it to us. And he spent 10 days helping to set it up. And we now have a physical, a TV studio. We had to take what little ground space we had that wasn't doing anything, that was full of storage, and remodel that and made a control room and about a 20 by 30, it's a 25 by 35 foot studio with TV lighting and everything in it, and 6 cameras on pedestals, and 2 more. And we also inherited a couple of RCA 2-inch videotape machines and a 1-inch, 2 1-inch Sony machines, and an Ampex machine, and a RCA color film chain, and a whole bunch of other stuff that we haven't really had time to go through. So
you're very fortunate to get that stuff too.
Well, it works. That's the amazing thing. It makes incredibly good pictures. I mean, it's NTSC, but NTSC can make amazing pictures. These things are really great. One of them's got a 70-to-1 zoom lens on the thing. God knows what that lens cost. I mean, but it's the kind of lens you could use on a golf tournament where you could be up on your scaffolding with a camera and zoom in so where you could see the ball and the tee as a full shot, and then pull back and follow it all the way to wherever it goes after the guy hits it. It would work really great for that. It's a little overkill in a room that's that small, but whatever.
That's about a $70,000 lens, no less than 55 grand for something like that. The glass on those things was phenomenal.
Yeah, it really truly is an amazing lens. I mean, God knows what the stuff cost when it was new, but it was a lot.
What
The
camera?
cameras, I'm sorry. The cameras they gave me there, they were all from WGBH up there in Boston. Funny thing.
GBH apparently gets new stuff periodically, and Paul's right there at the back door when it's going out to the dumpster.
Did those cameras have the full automatic alignment at that time?
Yeah, well, there's CCD cameras, but yeah, we got the master control panels and everything with it, and there's one panel that you can select up to 8 cameras, I think it is, and it has every control you can think of on it, but they'll auto set themselves up. I mean, they just make great pictures when you turn them on. They all run on Triax.
I didn't realize they were CCDs. About the early 90s, when we got our first HD cameras, which were tube, they had a built-in diascope with a special alignment pattern, and the the camera in setup mode would shoot that and automatically adjust the size of the scanning and the registration of the 3 tubes. And then to put the icing on the cake, they had programming built in that would change the size of the scan on each tube individually to take out the chromatic aberration in the lens.
Pretty amazing stuff. These have a built-in diascope too, and all kinds of auto setup features. You can manually go into anything you want though and do it yourself. So they're really, really cool cameras.
I worked on the TK-47 at RCA in the automatic setup thing. I co-hold a patent on that. And me and another guy figured out what we needed to do during a drive from Camden up to Princeton and fleshed it out. And it was all, individual ICs to make all that work back then.
Yeah, it's pretty complicated. We've got a few of those cameras, and one of them does work still, and several others may. I don't know. But we got. I think I've got at least 3 CCUs and power supplies and everything for all of them, and probably about 5 camera heads. So I think that was a fortune when that was new. But some of them came from WSMV in Nashville, and this guy called me up. This is years ago, and said, "I understand you like old TV cameras." And I said, "Well, yeah, kind of, Well, I was in the sound business, and he said, "Well, I used to be the chief engineer at WSMV, and I have these 3 RCA TK 76 47s rather cameras." And you're right. He said, and the boss told me to throw them out, and he said I had so much of my life tied up in making these suckers work that I couldn't throw them out. So I instead put them in my garage. And now my wife wants to park her car in the garage, so they got to go. And if you want them, you can have them. And I said, well, that's really nice, but I'm in Dallas and you're in Nashville. He said, that's not a problem. My nephew is going to University of Texas at Arlington this fall as a freshman. He's got a pickup truck. He'll bring them to you. So that's how he ended up with the first ones.
Would anybody know where I could find a complete CCU unit for a TK-41? I have parts of it. I think I have one of the control things for it, but I'd like to find the electronics. I'd sure like to dig into one of those.
That's going to be pretty rare. Chuck Ferris might have one.
No, well, no, sort of, but I don't think he did. Or he didn't part with it or something, but he sold most of his stuff there and he moved to Florida. He's down there now. He moved out of Turtletown, Tennessee. And he came up with a darnest thing that I didn't know that he had. Like I said, I used to live in Seattle, Washington in the early 60s, and I watched them build the World's Fair up there. And we lived up on Queen Anne Hill on Prospect Street, and our house overlooked the World's Fair, Puget Sound, Mount Rainier, and all of that, and the World's Fair was like walking distance for me. Plus all of the 3 television networks up there, King, Como, and Cairo. And I used to hang out in the transmitter sites up there. And I learned a lot when I was 10 to 12 years old up there. But anyway, I remember the TK-41 that Como had down at the World's Fair site. And it had a factory Como label on the side. I mean, made out of plexiglass. Looked like the letters were kind of puffed out in different colors. And I still remember it. I'm thinking, and I'm like, 11 years old back then. I said, oh man, I'd love to have one of those. They're like $70,000, back in that, that'd be like $500,000 is today. And of all the crazy things, Chuck Ferris learned of one up in Seattle up there. It was in a Lincoln Mercury dealership up there. And they got a new manager up there. And of course, they said that's got to go and this has got to go. And so Chuck drove up to Seattle and picked it up. And I remember that camera. They had two of them. And of all the things, you know, I've got their first color camera. I have that 21 CT55 that they used in their some kind of a room there for people to watch that were visiting, and some other Como stuff. But you know, here it is 60 years later, and I end up with it. You know, what are the chances of that happening?
Well, I remember that camera too, because I went to the Seattle World's Fair too when it was going on, and I was mesmerized by the color cameras, and they were really, really cool. That was just awesome. So I'm glad it survived at least.
And King Television had a booth down at the World's Fair. They had it where you'd sit down and see yourself on color TV, you know, one of those old round tube sets, you know. And that was just fascinating for me. And something else that I've ended up with that I used to play with when I was up there at Channel 5 transmitter was a RCA TK1, you know, the monoscope camera. I found one of those when I was up in Indianapolis. I was at a ham fest up there, and I was telling somebody about how I collect stuff and it's sort of a museum and all of that. And there's this guy standing there listening. He says, "You know, I've got something I think you might want." And he says, "I've got a one of those monoscope cameras." And I said, "Are you sure that's what it is?" "Yeah." And he says, "I've got some monitors too." And I said, "Are these monitors or TV sets?" "No, I think they're monitors." Well, anyway, he lived like 2 miles down from the Indianapolis fairgrounds there. And I couldn't wait to get out of there and go see what he had. And of all the things, he had a TM21, you know, that round tube, you know, 21 inch. And I'd lost one in a fire, and had a nice one that I lost in that fire I had 9 years ago. But man, he had all the goodies, and he had that monoscope camera. And I thought, oh my gosh. And if I had to tie my wife to the roof of that little car, that's coming back with me, with or without my wife, you know. And I got that went in my car first. I had a little Nissan Versa, you know. But anyway, I drove back up there and picked up the other stuff that he had, and had some neat stuff up there, which I had. But and he didn't want anything for it. He says, "No, I just want to get it out of my garage." But I gave him $100 anyway, kind of forced it on him. But he says, "No, I just want to get rid of this stuff." And he told me that he didn't have a tube in that monoscope camera. And of all the crazy things it did, it was complete. I can't wait to shop it out. And I want to do something just like they have up there at Woonsocket up there. You know, it's in a rack that rolls around, and I've got the WP16 power supplies, and I've got everything I need, and I just haven't had time to really get on it. But I'd like to get that thing shopped out, and I'm anxious to see what's on that monoscope camera. And it probably is channel 9 up there. Plus, I have another monoscope tube by itself. I'd like to know what's on that tube. So, you know, there's a lot of curiosity going on there that should be driving me pretty soon.
That's part of the adventure. If you get a monoscope camera and you got a couple of tubes, you have to try them all to see what's on it. You know, we have one that
Exactly.
says KSAT San Antonio, and another doesn't say anything at all, but they both work.
Well, they had the generic Indian head test pattern on it. But I remember King Television up in Seattle, their TK1 was kind of on the bottom of the rack, back in a corner. Because I remember asking them, I said, you know, where do they get that Indian head pattern? Showed me what it was. Man, that just fascinated the heck out of me. But I remember now, Cairo up there, Channel 7, they were on Queen Anne Avenue, and their studio transmitter site were on the same property. The tower's still there, and I think it's the building now is some kind of a health studio of some description. But before they had dumpsters back then, they had about 20 or 30 garbage cans out there. And I could walk by any one of these 3 television transmitter sites coming home from school, and I would raid those garbage cans, and you'd be surprised what I found in those cans. I'd find records, slides from their slide projector, and scripts and stuff. And I saved all of that stuff, but when we moved to Tennessee, My dad wouldn't let me bring hardly anything. I had to hide stuff in the car and in the back seat and stuff like that to get it because he didn't want me to bring anything. Because we came back with a 57 Buick and a trailer in the back in 1963 cross country. But I did sneak some stuff back there that I got that I highly treasure. But it was interesting going through those garbage cans, which you'd find exciter lamps and all kinds of stuff.
You are so much part of us, Julian. Things that all of us have done in maybe not quite at the level that you've done it. Wonderful.
Yeah,
was
but it all
always-
sounds familiar, doesn't it? You know.
I always was in the right place at the right time. When we lived, I said I was born in Washington, D.C. My dad worked in the government. And anyway, we lived about a mile from the Arlington incinerator. And I just walk up by High Street there to 31st Street and just follow 31st Street and it'd take me to the dump up there. And I had an old guy there in the, I don't know if you call it a guard booth, but what you do is weigh the garbage trucks coming in there. They burned all the garbage up there. But they had a fenced in area out there that people dump their old refrigerators and such. And here I am. I started out when I was like 7, 8 years old. And I'd go there looking for old radios and stuff. And I'd find stuff occasionally. And I'd run down telephone trucks. You remember the old telephone trucks in the mid 50s? It's like a Ford with that service body on the back and the ladder racks. If I caught one of them, found one, there'd be wire on the back of it, old telephone parts, and they'd just give me that stuff. And I'd play with it and I'd find batteries. And I used to find all kinds of crap. And as fast as I could bring it home, my dad would put it in the garbage. Well, I would hide stuff underneath the sofa to keep them, so I could have my stuff. Those were the only toys I had back then because my dad wouldn't buy me any real toys. So that's how I got started.
Well, I grew up in a small town that didn't have garbage pickup, so you had to go take every Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon, you would go take the stuff to the town dump. And that actually was a social thing. I mean, it
Oh.
became, yeah, no, it really was. I mean, everybody looked forward to seeing their neighbors in the town dump, and we'd exchange trash. I mean, I'd come back home with more crap than we left with sometimes, you know, because you'd find old radios, old TVs and stuff, and I'd drag all that stuff home. And when I went off to college, my dad made me throw it all away because he knew I was probably not coming back, and he'd have to deal with it. So, unfortunately, a lot of stuff that was kind of neat went back to the dump, and I hope somebody picked it up. Probably didn't, though.
Yeah, I had to make my own toys, though. What was the neatest thing you ever found in the trash by yourself?
Good question. Several radios. There's some early radiolas that I picked up. I know I got a TV out of it. I think it was an Admiral, 17-inch set Bakelite cabinet and stuff. The cabinet had a big crack in it, but I didn't let that bother me. I got the thing working, as I recall. So the picture tube was still okay. And we used to go I worked at a Philco dealer when I was in high school, and we would go take Philco Predictives and see how far we could throw them at the dump. Really, because they were coming in all the time because they didn't work. And, we're talking 1964, 65, something like that. So it was a, 8, 9-year-old TV set, and it needs a new CRT, and that's going to be $100. And we could sell you a brand new TV for $119. And if you smiled the right way, we'd give you a roll around stand for the thing too. So most people just bought a new TV, and we take these things and throw them away. I'm sure I'm responsible for at least 20, 25 of them meeting their untimely end.
So you work for a Philco store there?
Yeah, it was a TV shop that sold Philco and Motorola. And,
when I was in high school, Bearden High School here in Knoxville, and the Bearden Shopping Center was adjacent to it, of all things. So after high school, when I get out of school, I worked there at Music Land. They were a Zenith distributorship. And then I met a guy here named Dan Gettings. He was a Zenith service guy here. At one time he was the leading service guy. And anyway, he stole me from Music Lane there, and I worked for him for a while servicing, running out. And I used to replace picture tubes in the home. It's just no big deal. I don't know if I could do it now, but it just back then I just learned, how to do that. And I remember the one thing in particular, talking about those picture tubes. There was I think it was a condo, and they had their mother-in-law living upstairs. And she had one of those, a 23-inch Zenith, those metal cabinets. And the picture tube in that thing was just completely shot. She was bedridden, and she just watched that TV all day long. It had a little bit of blue for a picture, no green, no red, just a dim blue picture. The tube was just gone. Well, they had another Zenith set downstairs that had the same 25 XP22. I think that's what it was. And it had a pretty good life still left in it, but they wanted a new picture tube in it. And I told Dan, I said, what we ought to do, let me put a new picture tube in that set downstairs, and then I'll take that tube and put it in that lady's set upstairs, and she'd have a better picture on it. And then I'd turn hers in for the dud on it, because a dud was like $30 back then. Well, that's what we did. Let me tell you, that old biddy up there, she said, "What did you do to my TV set? Oh, what, you ruined it. It's just the picture. Oh, it was just awful." And she's watching some dim blue picture, and now there's a picture in it that you could actually watch. And she just did nothing but complain about it. Remember another instant, when you adjust the set, you adjust the vertical hole, the picture would start rolling. And anyway, the lady standing there said, wait a minute, but can you back that up again? I think I like that other picture better. And I thought, oh, she's got to be kidding. But anyway, I played her little game there. So I rolled it back where the picture just kind of float, going from bottom to the top and all of that. I said, now pick out a picture you like there. She says, I like that one. And I said, okay, it's locked in. And she was happy as a clam. People that you meet.
I remember going on service calls, and you go in somebody's house and there were purple people with green backgrounds that with all kinds of just horrible looking color pictures. And I'd go fix it. And then they'd be pissed off that you ruined my TV. I liked it.
Yeah.
They actually liked it that way. It's like, okay.
It's just like that old biddy that was upstairs. I couldn't believe it. I mean, you couldn't even watch the picture on it. It was so dim that it was just awful. How could you compare that with one that you can actually see and say you ruined my TV set? Oh, geez.
Well, my favorite memory from, back in the very early 60s, there weren't that many people with color TVs where I grew up. And everybody that had one seemed to have the same philosophy, was that I paid for color, damn it. I'm going to get all the color I paid for. And they would go in and take the chroma control and crank it all the way up.
My brother would do that. The faces look like red blobs,
Even at the tender age of 10 years old, I said, that doesn't seem quite right.
Then I had another customer. He'd turn the color up so barely. It was just one notch. You could say it was a color TV set, barely. It was just one notch above, black and white. But he didn't like rich color in it or anything. I've seen that, but man, there was just all kinds of people like that back then.
Maybe that was because they didn't have any automatic tint control in those days, and the sets were, people didn't want to run up to the sets and fix the colors. So it was better just to have something that was almost black and white. I mean, I remember trying to pick up a little change. Sometimes I would babysit the local houses, and if I was lucky, I'd get the one house on the block that had color sets, color set in it. It was an old RCA CTC 15, which is what I have. I have one of them now, and I would always adjust the colors, but I was adjusting it constantly because every time a commercial would come out, on the colors would be off again.
I always had a small passion for the old GE Portacolors, the tube sets that they had when they came out in like 1966. But there was an estate sale in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and they showed a picture, and I said, "Oh, there's an old Portacolor there." And anyway, I drove all the way out there. They had another set and some other stuff that I kind of wanted. So we hit the road there, went to Chattanooga for this estate sale. But that Portacolor had an original Gusdorf cart that went with it. I didn't even know Gusdorf made custom carts for a GE Portacolor. But that kind of thrilled me because I've never seen one before, because they were designed to be, like a little 10-inch kitchen set, more or less. And you wouldn't need a cart for one. But that surprised me.
That was a milestone set. That was the first inline, one of the first inline gun sets. That was a very unusual set.
Well, working for Music Land there, they had a picture tube rebuilding plant here in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's Paul Mercer, his Tennessee Valley Tube Company. And I used to work for him on Saturday mornings. And I remember I took an 11 SP-22 and put a Delta gun on the back to see what would do it. Paul was agreeable to it, and wish I'd saved that. And I gave it back to him and all that, but I mean, it was a disaster, really. The tube worked, but man, there's no way you could fix the color on it. But we just wanted to see what it would be like to put a Delta gun on a Portacolor tube, and we did it. Wish I had that tube. I guess it got thrown out in the garbage. And when he did go out of business, I had a chance to get all of his a plant there, and he had a tube lathe there. That, gosh, that thing was old as Methuselah, but boy, that was a good one. And had a vertical lathe, and that's better stuff than what I've seen today of what they used to build tubes. If I'd had the room back then, I could have gotten the cooking ovens and the lathe, both the vertical and the horizontal lathe there. And if Superior Tube Company was still building gun mounts, I could actually rebuild picture tubes, because I know every step there is to do it, but there's just, that equipment just doesn't hardly exist anymore. Guess they scrapped all that stuff a long time ago.
Well, folks,
We're
I
gonna
got
get
to sign off
together
for the
in
evening.
May, Julian, at the museum, and a couple of the guys are gonna give the rebuilding a shot. You may want to join them.
I'm wondering how that's going to work out, because that lathe they've got up there, I think they got it. What was the name of that outfit that was building tubes and they gave the stuff?
Well, there was, some of it came from Hawkeye, some of it came from Rax in France.
Right.
Well, I'm going to say good night, folks. You guys have a great time. Good to see you all. Some of you I'll see you tomorrow.
There was, I just wonder how that vertical lathe they've got up there. I mean, that's flimsy. I don't see how you can the fires that are on it, the torches on it. I don't see how that.
Well, the vertical lathe is from a garage setup, the back of the TV shop setup. The horizontal lathe is the one that came from the big rebuilding shop.
But anyway, there's some tricks to. I remember one of the things that you have to do, what we started out with when you get the dud tube, he had a large sink in the back, and it had like 2x4s across it where you could just set the tube on it, face down, and we'd scrub it, get all the dirt off of it and scrape all the old dag off of it. Then you'd put it in a rack, with the tube facing upward. And they had these like tongs, and it had a nichrome wire on it that would wrap itself around the neck down there, and you'd do it pretty close to where the button is. And it would get red hot when you'd squeeze it, and you'd keep it on there for about 15, 20 seconds. And then when you took it off of there, the glass would be kind of glowing a little red. And then you lick your finger, touch it, and go chink, and it would crack perfectly around there. But the trick of it is that you don't let it down to the atmosphere. We put a black plastic trash bag over it and fill it with nitrogen. And that was it. So you let it go down to nitrogen and it keep all of the moisture out, because one of the poisons is the moisture and the humidity. And it doesn't take much to stain the faceplate on a color tube. And then when it would go down to air, then we just pull the gun out of it, and then it would go to the horizontal lathe and would weld a new piece of glass on the neck. And then it went to the vertical lathe and it hit the fires. And we had a lever that had let the gun go up into the thing there, and he hit the fires around the button there, and it'd anneal itself to the button. And then the excess glass would kind of drop down. And then you take a file and you could just knock the glass off of it. Then it'd go in the ovens. And the ovens would be about 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and it had a gas burner around it. And then you had a coil there for flashing the getter on it. Looked like a transmitter kind of sort of, and it put RF on that coil there, and it'd heat up the cathode in the thing there and flash the getter in it. And the tubes came out pretty good there. We had no problems, but he'd sell picture tubes rebuilt for $30 exchange. And
That's an interesting trick with the nitrogen. I'll have to mention that to the guys that are going to dick around with it and see if we can scare up some nitrogen.
Yeah, you can get nitrogen in those big cylinders, is how we got it. But you can let them down to air, but I noticed that if you let it go down to air, you get like a round color tube or something, and it'd be kind of a spot in the center. It'd be kind of where the moisture kind of went up in it. But moisture will poison the faceplate or the phosphors on it. So anyway, he had a guy that came down from Michigan or somewhere that was an expert on all of this, and he gave us a lot of pointers. He sat down and the guy says, "Now you explain to me what you do from start to finish and don't leave out anything." But that was one of the major tricks there, is that as soon as you crack the glass there and let it go down, to put a black plastic bag and fill it up with nitrogen, and that improved the quality of it, an ungodly amount. And the faceplate doesn't get stained. Some guy on the Facebook or somewhere said, "How do they do that? They take a saw and saw the gun off?" And I'm thinking, no, I don't think you want to do that. They said no, but you have to use that wire wrap around it and crack the neck there, and that'll let it down. But Superior Tube Company is where we got our gun mounts from, and I don't know, I'm sure they're not in business or some other business, but that's who used to make all the gun mounts. Be nice if they could still do them again. Somebody should be able to. Oh, and another thing that we'd do in testing the tube, would run the filament voltage way up there, around 20 volts or something. It'd light up like a Christmas tree. But the filaments in those tubes will withstand a lot more than you think they will. It would make sure that that the button annealed itself properly, and that the filament kind of break in, so to speak. But they turned out pretty good. I still have a tube that Paul built, a 21 FJP 22, a round two with a bonded face on it. I still have one in the box that's never been touched since it was rebuilt. Saving that for something special.
Julian, you don't have any 15 GB 22s, do you?
I have one, It's actually a 15 HP 22. Same thing. Came out of a CBS television set. It's in its original, has a like a wooden frame kind of sort of with a degaussing coil, I think, around it. Or I may be, I think it does. But last time I checked it, it checked pretty good. And there was some guy that brought an old color set up there to the foundation up there, and I thought very seriously about buying that from him because I've got a tube for it.
Well, I'm asking, I've got a Westinghouse color set that needs a tube, so.
I bet I've had that tube for 30 years now.
I'll have to reach out to you.
Yeah, we'll see. What have you got to trade? Like a TRK 12 or anything like that?
Well, that's a good question. I have a TRK 12 that has been restored that works beautifully. I have a cabinet for a TRK 120 with a good audio chassis, but somebody hacked out the television part.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, that came from Sacramento.
I've got another CT 100 that came from Dave up there in Chicago. And I brought it up to the foundation there one time and they checked the tube in it. It was like almost perfect, but nobody wanted to pay much for it at the time, and I still have it. And, but yeah, I've got this tube here. It's a nice display piece on it, and it still has a sticker on it. It says for experimental use only. You know, that if it was, I imagine it was given as a sample, you know, if everybody was going to be buying tubes back then. And, but it doesn't denote that they're going to start manufacturing these. It's just that, you know, use it. If we get a demand for it, we'll start building them. But this one was for an experimental set. What was that guy's name up in New Jersey? Harry Poster.
Yep. Was that tube you're talking about, Julian, the 15H?
It's, I believe it says 15 HP 22 on it.
I think I heard, we were talking about that one time. I think every 15H was marked experimental use only.
It could have been a pre-production of a 15 GP. But
no, it was actually a refinement of the 15G, but it was, I think they were all labeled experimental. I'm not sure. It might have been the lawyers involved. I don't know.
Oh, well, that could be. But I did see a CBS set. I think it might have been one up there at the Early Television Foundation. I was looking at it. I said, that's the same thing I've got. It just sits in a wooden frame, like an L-shaped frame. And gosh, I got it here. Let me go back and take a quick look at it and see if it, I don't know if it had the yoke on it or not, but I'll be right back in a second.
Yeah, Dennis, I saw your note pop up there. That Thomas Electronics advertises CRT rebuilds, but I think if they're doing any, they're doing them for the military, and I don't think we'd want to pay whatever they're charging the military. And they don't want to talk to us.
Bad part is it might be the only game in town.
Can't quite hear you.
There's a yoke on it. It's got a yoke on it and a metal support thing in the back of it. Wonder if I could take a picture of it. If anybody could see it. Anybody might want to see a picture of it?
Go ahead.
Sure, if you can snap one.
Let's see if I can do that. See if this will work. Can you see it, get an idea of it?
Oh, yep. Sure looks like a 15 GP22.
It says experimental, something like that on it. But
Well, that's something.
I like it. I haven't thought much about it. It's just something that it is a good one as far as I know, but if I could trade it for something that's
Well, one thing's for sure, the video gamers that use the guns need to have a CRT scan for those video games to be able to track where on the screen they're shooting.
oh yeah, they have
LCD,
like yeah, it has a little photo cell in it.
yeah, LCDs don't do it.
But yeah, that's why they like a CRT that do that. You can't use it for an LCD. I operate game rooms up in Pigeon Forge, and we have some games here that they do have an LCD screen, but instead of a photo cell, it uses actually a little miniature TV camera for tracking on it. But yeah, a lot of those 10-inch, 15-inch color TV sets are commanding pretty good money on eBay right now because the gamers want that. I forgot about them. So that's why they want them. Just dawned on me.
And I was just given a PVM 2030 Sony, and of course I've got the larger ones. I've got like 4 of the larger ones, but because I was a television engineer and when television was analog, um, it's funny. Every set you'll see is all out of adjustment on CRTs. They were always oversaturated. It's unbelievable. Only one time did I actually see a properly set up Sony television in Los Angeles. And I was amazed because I was used to always the studio pictures in-house at the television station that I was an engineer at. And I was always used to studio pictures. And I walked into this friend's house and lo and behold, I had was almost the equivalent of a studio picture in his house. And it just blew me away. I don't know who he paid to set it up, but obviously, you know, because most people don't have a clue how to set up a TV correctly. And of course, everything you see in the showrooms is oversaturated because, you know, they want to sell the ones that have the brightest color. And the thing is, all the people that are doing the reviews on all these television sets on the online sales and manufacturers' websites, these are not professionals. These are these are the public that are giving all the reviews, and there are no longer technical specifications that are posted anywhere anymore. So it's just funny. You're getting bad reviews, and you know it's like typical sales. You know, snake salesmen everywhere.
The county of Knoxville here they have their surplus sales. They had a pallet load of rack mount 15-inch Sony monitors, you know, pro monitors there. And I ended up with them. And anyway, I thought I'll put one up for sale. And I didn't realize that they're actually worth some money. This one guy came and he I had a Sony Profile, and I let him have that Profile and one of those Sony monitors for like $150 each. And he was thrilled to get it. And anyway, I said, well, I might sell that whole pallet load out there. Man, it wasn't but about 3 or 4 days later, he wanted to buy that whole pallet load from me. And I said, what's going on here? And I started looking them up, and they're bringing $400, $500, and $600 on eBay. Yeah, I guess he was after them. I told him, I said, I can't let them go because they go to other equipment. And I'd still need a bunch of them for myself anyway. So I didn't sell anymore after that. I remember I did throw away, I let some 21 inchers go there a while back. And I sorry I ever did that. I didn't know that they had any value except
Oh, yeah.
taking up space.
I used to recap, beta VCRs for the television station. I used to pull the boards, recap them, reassemble them, do electrical alignments, and of course, replace upper and lower drum assemblies. And that was so much fun doing all that stuff. And it was so rewarding because you would get perfect pictures out of everything once you were done with them. And most people didn't see that quality of video. And that's why I think it's funny when I go to all these sites and they say, oh, analog is noisy and it's grainy and it's this and it's that. They don't have a clue what they're talking about.
They don't even know what they're talking about.
Yeah. And then when Faruja came out with Super NTSC, right now it would be considered half the resolution of regular HD of 1080. So, but Faruja, their Super NTSC put DVDs to shame. I mean, it was unbelievable how good the video was on that. And I live in Las Vegas, so of course I go to the National Association of Broadcasters convention all the time, and I was dealing with all the vendors, and yeah, people don't have a clue what analog could have done or was capable of doing, because a lot of people didn't set up their antennas right. They didn't set up their TVs right. I mean, there were so many things that people did wrong. And then of course I went to work for Cox, and I was in the MTC, which we put the signals on the cable in the department that I was at. So I worked on everything from satellite dishes, which were 4.5 meters in diameter, to wow, everything I worked on there. So
I've got one of my warehouses. I've got 3 Sony 1-inch machines. You know, what are
Yeah.
they, like BVP 2000 or
we
1200
were
or something
3000
like that?
series, yeah.
Something like that. I've got 3 of them, and I'd like to see if I could trade them off for something that I could use, because I've actually got 4. I've got one that was made for the NAB convention back around 1980 or something like that. And I've got the cabinet that it's in and stuff like that. In fact, one of those 15-inch Sony monitors I've got her go right in it because someone pulled the monitor out of it. But I've got 3 of them I'd like to do something with. Somebody needs to come down here sometime, or up here, or over here. And if they have any interest in stuff, I've got some stuff I might let go of if, you know, they trade or the cash might be right on it. Got to get something out of it.
And
Because
see, the 1-inch ones that we had in the TV station, we actually had some that had a vacuum in it, that it was self-threading. You would put the reels on, and as you fed it in, the vacuum would run the tape, the 1-inch tape, all the way through the tape path, and you would just grab it and put it on the reel.
that RCA was real good about that when they made that TC100 had those 2-inch cartridges that would go
yeah, the
in a
TCRs.
carousel. Yes. To watch one of those things work is the most amazing thing. It would literally blow the tape out of it. I mean, just blow it out of it. You know, it's all pneumatic anyway, like all of those 2-inch machines are. But it would load the cartridge there, find the right one, and it just blow the tape out of it. And the same thing, it looked like it'd destroy the tape, but it never, you know, it took perfectly good care of the tape. They had one of those here in Knoxville, a TV station, and they got rid of it unbeknownst to me. I'd love to have had that machine, but
They
that was
took your fingers off, though. They were wicked machines. You know, when they had the guides in there, the guides would go into the cart and they would separate, you know, and pull the tape out, and then the head assembly the whole assembly would go into the tape, and then they would release it. But I mean, those suckers, yeah, you'd have to be careful working on those suckers.
Oh, I can imagine. But man, I mean, to see one of those things work it's an amazing thing to watch. That it doesn't destroy the tape. But you know, it took good care of the tape though.
But see, that was days when you had to have engineers in the TV station.
And they did.
Yeah.
But they're about all gone now.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing they have now are like newbies that just sit there on a computer screen and do stuff. And It's not like it used to be, and I don't.
Well,
I-
it was an art. It
Do
was
they
definitely an art.
do any of these do they require them to have? Is there any set? I've got a first class FCC ticket, you know, and then it
Don't
was
need
sent
it.
as a general telephone, radio telephone. But do they do that stuff anymore?
You don't need a license at all.
To You don't need a first class ticket to work on the transmitters or
No,
anything?
no, legally you don't.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. But anyway, it was fun. They had, I know I had to go down to Atlanta for the FCC office down there. And Angelo Diddy was the chief FCC officer in charge there. And he would administer the test. You know, you had to get your third class license, which is just rules and regulations. And then you go, if you pass that, then you could go to your second class, and they give you an exam with 120 multiple guess questions on it. And then I studied 6 months to go back to get my first class, which is what I did. But all of the, you know, you could memorize answers from cheat sheets and stuff like that. But what they would do, the answer would be like 0.1, 0.01, 0.001. But he wanted to make sure you did understand the question and understand what you're doing. Well, he would give you a blank piece of paper to go along with your exam, and you could use your slide rule or a TI 35, you know, a calculator or something. He'd let you use that. But if you maxed the exam, you know, perfectly and turned in a blank piece of paper, he would fail you. And he wanted to make sure, and he wanted to see some scribbling on the page that he could tell whether you knew how to work the problems or not, which was really a good idea.
Oh, yeah. See, I started in 1974 with a provisional permit, which had to be signed off by the chief engineer. So I started without a license because the provisional, you know, was acceptable at that time. And of course, that was only good, I think, for a year. But by that time, I had gotten my third with the broadcast endorsement. And that was with FCC testing here in Vegas. Every 6 months, the FCC would come to town and do testing at the National Guard Armory.
Yeah,
And
something along that line. Yeah.
And when you walked in the door, at that point, you didn't talk unless they told you to talk. You didn't you didn't raise pencils. If you broke your lead on the pencil, you raised it up and they came to you.
Hmm.
Then they were very strict. I mean, if you said anything, you were done.
Wow.
They were so strict.
Earlier, I mentioned that I knew Norman Alquist up in Seattle. Well, he had a pirate radio station up in Queen Anne High School. And I was not high school back then. See, I was like 12 years old back then. But when I'd walk home, I'd walk by Queen Anne High School. Well, I'd go in there and go up to the 4th floor in the building where the science lab was. And Mr. Short was a science teacher. And finally, one time he says, well, don't come back anymore until you're in high school or something. But that's about the time we moved away. But Norman Alquist had built a pirate radio station up there with like 807 tubes, you know?
Yeah.
And anyway, I remember going up there and there were these two guys in there. And I said, what are you playing? It sounded like someone just narrating something. He said, it's a record on philosophy or something. Well, of all the crazy things while I'm there watching them do this, the pirate radio station, 2 men in dark suits came in up there. And as I was walking out, the guy says, are you operating a radio station? I said, no, but they may be in there. And I left. I mean, I thought they were like police back then, you know. And
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I don't think they confiscated the equipment, but I'm sure they shut them down. But yeah, Seattle, Washington had a main FCC office up there, you know, just like Atlanta and probably Las Vegas or something, you know, where they have a main office
Curious
there.
part was you had to reply to the charges within 10 days, you know, and it's like, either quit doing what you're doing or they're coming after you big time.
Well, that was a big deal back then, that
Oh, yeah.
FCC office. You didn't want, yeah, you didn't want an FCC officer come around, looking for problems and stuff like that. But,
Hey, guys, I have to sign off. It's been great. See you next month.
yeah. I've got a guy that's wanting to buy a chairside Zenith radio from me. He's calling here or there, and I had to shut him off there, so I better call him to find out if he's coming around to come pick it up or something. But yeah, if anybody needs a 1-inch tape machine, I've got them. I'm sure I've got more stuff I'd like to get rid of, something, but these millennials, they don't know or even care about what's going on anymore. The only thing they want is a new cell phone. Well, folks, I'm going to sign off here, and it's been a pleasure listening to everything here, and I hope I contributed a little something here that wasn't too boring. Anyway, hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving there, and that they have a blessed day and a blessed tomorrow there. So this is Julian Burke signing off there, but thanks a lot, guys.
Night, everybody.
And I, Julian, and the best thing everybody can do is to write out a biography of what they did all through their lives and the experiences, because these experiences, they are valuable. But the thing is, when people pass away, all these life experiences disappear. And the thing is, then we forget about all this. And it's like, you don't know how valuable your life experience is, and you should document it in some way or a manner. And we should find a way to have a site to access it all. Gentlemen, you all have a good evening.
I've been told that, but one thing, as old as we are, back in the early 60s when I was still playing with this stuff, I was talking to engineers that had been there for 20 and 30 years that were there from the 1960, 40 years earlier, in the 40s, 50s, and all of that. I mean, I learned from them, from their old school, and see, that doesn't happen anymore. It's all long gone now, except what's in the history books. But yeah, I need to sit down one day and just relay some of the experiences I had.
I would like to see documentation on the mechanical recording age, where everybody had megaphones that went into mechanical styluses that actually cut the masters without any electronics at all. In fact, all the performers, the singers, the vocalists, the band, everything was in a closet-sized room that this megaphone would point at. And that was your early mechanical recording that was unbelievable. And surprisingly, 78s, when you clean them and when you EQ them and run them through digital processing, you'll find out that they actually have fidelity on them. And people don't realize that because they're used to steel needles reproducing the sound off 78s. But it's amazing how much fidelity is actually on a 78, and you can pull it off, but it does take work. So nobody's gonna see it, public wise.
I still remember they had a little tub like thing there and had a whole bunch of those steel needles in it that would dig into the record. And I guess records had a life expectancy back then, but if they were played a lot, but
that's how you sold records.
That's how you sell it. Well, anyway, have a blessed evening, folks. Good night.
Good night, guys.
Yeah, on the acoustic recording, I saw a photograph once of a violin or fiddle that they made for recording acoustically, and it had a horn on it.
Yep.
They had to put those guys in the front row by the pickup horn. That was fascinating. I'm interested in early video recording going back into the 20s too, and trying to write something for the newsletter that mentions some of that.
Oh yeah, the 1/4-inch tape videotape. They're big reel-to-reels with 1/4-inch tape, but they went screaming past the heads.
Oh yeah, there was that one British company that had reels that were going at 120 IPS or something like that, crazy stuff. But that was the first home machine about 1960 or so.
Yeah.
I remember reading about that in Popular Science. Ronald Benry was the technical editor at that time, and he wrote that article.
I couldn't believe somebody made a cartridge that reversed back and forth, and and it screamed by as well. But I could imagine that cartridge stopping and then changing direction. How fast that that movement would have been.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I'm going back to the 1920s and Baird and Boris Resheloff and Baker and some of the early recording people, and then there's a group that has tried to reproduce some of that on a little bit more modern vinyl records, and that's the main interest.
Yeah, but I remember the one where Ampex with one of their first recordings, they shot on Hoover Dam just outside of Vegas here, and I remember seeing that video. But that was pretty crude, but that was an early video recording.
Yeah, Ampex wowed them all. They were amazing.
Yeah.
Ray Dolby's early work. He started there when he was a teenager.
Wow.
Yeah, and the stuff that he knew because he'd learned it himself with his hands and his mind. There was no place to go for reference on that.
Right.
Fabulous.
But and I always got mad at Sarnoff for being so cruel to Armstrong, because I really thought Armstrong had the mind to do a lot more than he could, other than be in court with Sarnoff all the time.
Well, Sarnoff was a ruthless businessman, but he also made the industry. So that's what he invented, and there was nobody else there. He was irreplaceable. But yeah, he and DeForest and Farnsworth and Armstrong were at war, and there's a book about that, The Empire of the Air. And also they made into it, and also made into a TV show for PBS, which might still be out there on YouTube someplace.
Sure.
And yeah, that was fascinating. But yeah, he destroyed people. There's no question about it. I mean, Armstrong committed suicide, and then several years later, his wife won all the lawsuits that he had against RCA. Too late.
Can you believe that? Oh.
Yeah. And DeForest was in and out of one company after another for his whole career. And it was, but Sarnoff had a way of presenting things to people. He was theatrical.
Yes.
That was also John Baird's main talent, in my opinion. He was able to promote television, and a lot of his inventions either didn't work or didn't work very well, but he used them to promote television.
But because I worked in digital electronics, it's always funny for me to always think that everybody says, "Oh, everything needs to go digital." That final RF amp in a digital amp is analog. They call it a linear amplifier, and it's like it has to be very linear. And it's like, come on, guys. It's either a linear amplifier or it's not. We've been lying to people saying all these amplifiers are linear amplifiers when indeed they are not. They're close, but they're not linear amplifiers. And they say, well, if you're going to amplify digital, you have to make sure it's a linear amplifier. And it's like, well, they should stop calling all these other amps linear amplifiers. Yeah, I was working in the cable head end, and I was working directly with commercial broadcasters as they were doing the transition, and I was in charge of the Las Vegas system with changing out all our receivers and doing our digital broadcasting on cable. And I was, it's funny, all the other systems on Cox across the country that were doing the transition, they were all supervisors, and I was the only one that was not a supervisor, but was in charge of the transition here in Vegas. But I thought that was interesting. And on a first name basis with all the engineers, I did have one unique instance where television, their source material was a tiny little digital tape. It was a tiny DAT. I don't think it was DAT, but it was a tiny digital tape. And I was talking to my buddy who was the chief engineer over at Channel 5, AVVU, a Fox station. I told him exactly what program it was. I asked him what deck it was played on, And of course, he took me right into his control rooms. And and it's so sad because the operator immediately ejected the tape that was in that deck that happened to be on the air, you know. And he ejected that and he placed it in another deck. And of course, they continued on with the show from, the loading and unloading and locking. You only had to wait for that delay before he was back on the air. But yeah, like I said, my buddy, the chief, he went and analyzed the output of the deck and immediately they pulled it out of service. It was throwing errors. And what was crazy though, was the errors only affected the cable system and did not affect their over-the-air signals. It was really interesting, but the deck did fail. So, but I mean, I really enjoyed working with all these engineers. And when I was an engineer at the analog station, I loved going up to the transmitter site and pulling equipment down, servicing it, and reinstalling it back up at the transmitter site. Because from the transmitter site in Las Vegas on Black Mountain, you could actually see Lake Mead. I mean, it's so cool. You were high enough to see over the mountain range and you could see Lake Mead.
That's
And of
neat.
course, if you looked behind the transmitter site, there was a sheer drop.
Uh,
So you didn't go walking that way. But
to me, it's a little about the little scenery and talking about analog versus digital. I think there's still a lot of life in analog. Digital, there's no perfect technology. We have to admit that, and there's lots of flaws with digital technology too. And the resurgence of vinyl shows a little of that.
well, the thing we saw with digital is we were introduced to tiling, latency. I always like how the news reporters, when they hand it off to the next reporter, they're waiting there for like 5 or 7 seconds, and they're going, "Oh yeah," then
Yeah, yeah,
because of the latency with digital. I mean, we were used to analog that was almost real time. I mean, it was milliseconds, the delay across the country with the microwave links that went all across the country. So when we went to digital, and the funny thing is, depending on the decoder, because you're relying on your individual decoder on your TV set to produce your picture.
yeah.
And that's one of the first reasons why analog looks so bad. But because these digital TV sets, when they were first introduced, they had to convert analog to digital to display it. And that some of them had the very worst encoders to convert analog to digital for the LCD screen.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Go
the
ahead.
digital artifacts are very ugly by comparison with a little bit of analog snow. And if you're into television DXing at all, I think analog is still superior there.
Oh yeah, I used to pick up Fox 4 Texas. I was at work at KVBC is what the call sign was back then in the 90s. And our in-house system, which had an outside antenna for all the TVs in-house. And I told everybody on the in-house TVs, I said, go to channel 4. And our antenna was not pointed at Texas. Our antenna was pointed at Black Mountain,
Mm-hmm.
which was just south of Vegas. And Fox 4 Texas came booming in. And at one point, color even popped in. And this was when it was analog. But digital is capable of DXing, but it's not going to be quite as often. But it's a little harder path for digital than it is for analog. But yeah, I definitely have a love for analog because I've seen pristine analog. I've seen what analog can do. All these people that claim analog is bad, they don't have a clue. They're talking out their butts.
Well, there were higher resolution, like you said, there were higher resolution forms of analog before it died.
Mhm.
And the Japanese had one of them. There was the old French system, 819 lines, and the Faruja that you mentioned, which was intriguing. I think they call that intermediate definition when the HD TV came in.
Well, I actually have a recording off air of that broadcast of Super NTSC from Faruja.
Yeah.
So it was backwards compatible, and the pictures were stunning. And I was using rabbit ears, and the
Mhm.
pictures were stunning on that recording for what you can get out of VHS. But yeah, it was quite interesting.
Yeah, they made it impossible to go back. It wasn't like the transition from the CBS color system to NTSC, where there was a lot of voting and there was going back and forth and so on. It just you didn't have a choice, you know. You just had to convert. We're going to convert on a certain date, and I really didn't like that. I thought there should be some way of getting a compatible compatible color. We did get more channels out of it, but that's not really the same advantage as being able to turn on your set and just get better pictures.
But that was SD, and SD, you know, and that had artifacts too because of the high amount of compression. But yeah, they that 2009 date, that they failed that so many times. And then of course you had all the translators that were still analog for the longest time. And I think was it like 3 or 4 years ago, we had finally lost our last low power analog here in Las Vegas. And it was funny because the owners of the station, it was a shopping channel, of course, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
but the thing is, you could see that the output of that transmitter was dropping and dropping, and that poor channel was just going to snow. And I think that's probably why everybody says, "Oh, analog's so bad." But like I said, pristine analog, yeah, it'll surprise you.
I I wonder if Cuba is still analog.
Because nobody's got any money over there.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Maybe because they don't have the money, it might still be analog. It still might be receivable in some parts of the country, in this country.
It might be. But the other disappointment was ATSC 1.0. The TV stations are still not fully implementing it because a lot of the program guide and a lot of TV sets do not show this. But a lot of, and all my down converters, they show all the guide data. A lot of stations still don't do the guide data. I had some stations that couldn't even get their clocks correct. So if you had a receiver that scheduled recordings, once it went to that station, it would throw your receiver off, and then you would lose track of time. But yeah, the broadcasters have no interest in getting all the guide data in there because they were able to go with all the messages that ATSC and MPEG send. They were able to get up to 2 weeks of program data out there, and you're lucky if you get 6 hours of program data off the national networks.
Oh, it's still that bad. We haven't been watching much over the air television, but I know the guides weren't what they were purported to be.
Yeah,
They just weren't that good, the online guides. And the other thing was that I've heard, I wasn't paying attention to how it came out, but a lot of the stations early on believed what they said about low power operation, and they had to boost up their power again later to
yeah,
get a good signal. And because we had early on, we had all sorts of artifacts on local Chicago stations. And in one case, I had a Zenith converter box, and it would go into error messages on the screen.
oh, yeah.
And nobody else was reporting that, so I took a couple of pictures of them and put them up on the web. I think they're still up there in an archive section. Nobody cares about it anymore, but things that happened in 2009, you know.
Yeah, I had a Trevini RM40 8 VSB MPEG analyzer at my desk. In fact, I had it at my desk at work, and I was known as a stream cop because I was looking at all the PSIP tables that all the broadcasters sent, because anytime they had issues, it would affect my cable tables. So I was known as a stream cop, and I always had to make sure that the repetition rate of all their PSIP was in line, or downstream it would affect us. But so I've had a lot of digital training. And then the other thing is it makes it hard to watch TV because I'm trained to look for artifacts. So anything I watch, and particularly SDs, are extremely hard to watch. You see artifacts all the time on them. And I don't know, these are the people that we're going to entrust with ATSC 3. And I got the idea that Sinclair or Samsung or somebody dropped out of it. They're no longer producing receivers for ATSC3. I think it's Samsung. I forgot, but somebody dropped the receivers for ATSC3. So we don't know where that's going, but that's just another money grab. That's just another way to sell TV sets to the public. And, you know, it is what it is, but I don't trust the engineers with ATSC3 because until they get ATSC1 fixed and they have no idea, no intention of doing that, because they're just going to move on to ATSC3 and we're all going to get stuck with that.
That's the thing. One thing about digital, and I knew this was going to happen first when they first started talking about it. As soon as it went to digital, the technology would be turning over rapidly, just like all the other digital things. And they never finish with the bugs on the previous one before they put out the next one, which sometimes reproduces the same bugs. Just like look at almost any software that you run on your computer. There's things wrong with it, and they don't have time to fix them. And sometimes,
just like cell phones.
Yeah.
Just like your cell phone, a couple months later, it's obsolete. It's not obsolete. It's just, there's a newer and better, and, you need to get the new one now. Marketing.
Yeah, there's no thought to the legacy until it becomes a nostalgia issue, and then it's too late, really.
Well, look at AM radio. AM radio was a nice, viable format.
Yeah.
And the FCC has allowed the band to get cluttered with noise from all these wall warts, all these little switching power supplies. So the FCC was not looking out for us at all. And AM had gotten so bad. And now the savior for AM radio is HD radio. And that's incorrect too, because now you're talking wider bandwidth. And what is digital? Digital is basically noise.
Right.
Because it's randomized. It's randomized for a reason. It looks like a noise source. So anytime you have Skywave or anything, if anybody's transmitting digital, they're just increasing the noise floor everywhere else.
Yeah, people should have more respect for AM radio. You're right.
AM radio, FM, if they wanted to do digital FM, they should have taken channel 6 and moved all the digital FM stations down to television channel 6 and left the analog FM alone. But there's a reason why aircraft communication is still AM to this date.
Yeah,
there's a lot of reasons why that's the case.
You're talking about those beacons.
No, I'm talking about pilot communications is AM radio in the aircraft.
Oh.
Because the number one thing is if two pilots key up at the same time, air traffic control is going to be aware of it immediately, right? And be able to ask somebody to repeat. That's number one. But AM has just been superior for aircraft communications, and they have no intentions of going digital yet.
Well, they're superior for lots of things, even in television. Look what happened to CCAM when you tried to edit the videotapes with the FM color signals. It was a big mess. Go back to PAL, and even PAL, which they tried something very similar here with CPA. I don't think they really needed it.
Yeah.
Except for, patent royalties.
So even my computer monitor is from 95, 96. This is an old Sony Trinitron inline. And it still has emissions, but it's maxed out now. Because what is it, 30 years old almost?
That's a pretty good lifetime. What do we have today that lasts that long?
Well, that's because, again, as a television engineer, I minimized the contrast brightness. I ran everything conservatively. And of course, it's lasted just about a third of my life. Well, half of my life, I should say, because I'm 65 and this is 30 years. So go figure.
Very good. 30 years. That's very good. I've got an RCA set that we bought more than 40 years ago, but we don't watch it frequently, anymore. And but it still looks good. The controls are beginning to get a little corroded at this point, and the remote control is beginning to wear out, but the picture is still the same as it always was. And I think it also has an anti-age circuit on it.
And see, I've got brand new monitors to replace this, but why replace it if it still works?
That's right.
So I've got multiple, but of course they're larger too. But yeah, I have no intentions of replacing this until it really gets to be an issue, and then I have no choice.
Absolutely. If something still has utility and that's what you like in the first place, then all those other features are gratuitous and unneeded.
I'd
You
love
know?
to have that Thompson replace the gun on this thing and get it back up to snuff again. But of course, I can imagine what they would charge because they do the
Well,
military tubes, because the military still uses CRTs. Don't let anybody be fooled that they don't. But yeah, it's pretty wild.
I wonder
Well,
what
I
they.
would,
You might as well ask and find out if you wanted to have somebody do it. You know.
yeah,
Find
because
out.
I actually have two of these monitors. My friend gave me his, and I don't know what condition it's in. But yeah, I had to restore his first, and then restore mine.
It's very nice. Is it? It's not quite. Is it flat or is it not quite flat?
It's got a curve to it, but it's
Yeah.
flat in one plane, but it does have a curve.
Oh, it's still a traditional Trinitron. It's not the revised flat screen technology. It is some of because we have one of those from Philips. It's revised flat screen, but I believe it's an inline gun, so it's a combination of different things.
And the thing is, Sony just with the Trinitron, I mean, they just tore up the market. You know, when this tube came out, when was this in the 70s that the Trinitron came out, I believe?
Early, yeah.
And I think that just destroyed the market. But the thing was that people couldn't afford them.
Right.
I think that's why they bought the Delta ones and the other type of CRTs.
Well,
But I
Delta,
remember,
yeah, Delta still, even though it wasn't as bright, it still had some advantages on small details and the more random appearance of things. Some people liked it better, I think, for character displays. If I
yeah, I
remember
remember
right.
I worked for an electronics distributor called Hurley Electronics in Vegas here, and it was 1112 Casino Center Boulevard, and the phone number was like 383-8444. It was like I said, it was an electronics distributor, and we would take in 25-inch picture tubes, and the most common picture tube replacement was I think it was a 25 AP22, was such a generic replacement for most 25-inch picture tubes. And we sold them for $100 or $200 a piece, and I think we only paid $30 to have them rebuilt.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, at 200 probably wasn't the installed price, though. It was probably just
No, that was just for the tube.
the glass, yeah.
Yeah. But the
Yeah.
thing is, people had consoles. People had, furniture. I mean, Magnavoxes were gorgeous. I mean, if you kept that in great shape and oiled, I mean, the wood on that, I mean, I would love to have a Magnavox console just for the sound system and mount an LCD on the wall above it, just because of the quality sound that came out of those Magnavoxes.
Yeah. And they had one of the first video games, the Odyssey, too.
Yeah.
Working on
I
those.
just didn't like the overlays, the plastic overlays on the tube.
Yeah, I think that was. I didn't play one. I remember writing an ad for it at one point.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a milestone for them. I have an RCA set that I pulled out of the alley and I put in a rebuilt tube and turned in the old stud for the fee, which was only about $10. But it has a Magnavox tube in it now. And I think the Magnavox is beginning to go because there were still things wrong with the chassis that I was working on.
Yeah.
It's been sitting there now for over 30 years.
But the only thing the only reason to restore this stuff is for the love of the technology of the time, because nobody's going to pay you what it's worth to actually restore this stuff. And it's like I just keep thinking, like I've got antique radios that the finish, it was from my mom and dad's house, and they had it in a storeroom in extreme temperatures, and the finish has started to crack and come off. And I need to find somebody who can actually do a serious refinish on this old Normandy German radio. It was so cool.
Oh, Nordmean probably.
Yeah, Nordmean.
Yeah. Is it missing veneer?
Well, some of the veneer is cracked and came off. Not the veneer,
no.
not the veneer itself, but the stain on the veneer.
Oh.
So the veneer is there. It's just a stain on the veneer that's cracked and started coming off.
sometimes you can stain over that. It's not really something that the experts at that would probably frown at it, but you could probably patch little places with a dark color stain. Most of them are dark enough so that the exact color doesn't match, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's also going to be in shadow when in most people's rooms, and the difference will be invisible.
Yeah.
So I have one where some of the veneer fell off, and for the time being, I thought, well, what the heck? Just stain the wood underneath it the same color, and let the next person put veneer on top of it. It won't hurt the radio to be the right color.
Yeah.
And it really worked pretty well.
But it has the iTube and everything for tuning and
Oh yeah, that'll probably make it worth more. Does it
Yeah.
work? The iTube work?
I haven't powered it up because it's on the shelf. It's one of the projects.
It has to be recapped, no doubt.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to do a lot of that, but I just don't have the time and energy anymore. And besides, I'm interested in mechanical TV, not buying them, not collecting them, but building them and studying them. And that's really a basis for a lot of my electronics education, because I had to learn how to convert those tube circuits into transistors. I didn't switch to IC. I did early on try with ICs too, but I prefer to do it with discrete transistors.
And see, how did they sync those spinning discs?
The first ones were manual, then they used phonic motors after that. And the phonic motor ran off of the TV signal, and it picked up sync from that. And then they also had one that used a generator and sent out a generator signal on another channel. And some of them had more than one generator, 2 generators. So all different methods. That the most common thing for the amateur, though, of course, was just manual sync.
Yeah.
And there were people that were quite good at that.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen that.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
well-
I think the club ought to interest people in that by having some kind. I was going to mention it in the main meeting, but people were on a different subject. But like me, having an auxiliary of people that were interested in dramatic arts, amateurs, and bring out some of the old scripts and do them for different formats of television. So you could see the difference in how television progressed and what type of makeup and lighting that they had to use with mechanical, and then intermediate definition television, medium definition television, and then on to CRT television.
Wasn't that about 40 lines and something about Felix the cat or something? And that was early stuff, I think.
24, 30, 36, 48, 60, 90, 120, and then it went into CRTs. Yeah, Felix the cat, they used him just about every place. And then they had a ventriloquist doll in England too, Stooky Bill.
Yeah.
They used, but it was the same idea. There was a particular model. Peter Yancer had one that he picked up at a carnival. It was a plastic Felix the cat. It looked like the exact one they used. It's beautiful. And there's a book that I have that shows the 60 line version of Felix the cat, and then a later 441 line Felix the cat. And interestingly, that set, it doesn't have the best horizontal size control on it, so it's a little stretched.
Yeah.
And you can see the difference side by side, which is beautiful. But there was it was a different situation, in the 1920s, and the Roaring 20s, and just after that, the early 30s, when people were, it was a big thrill just to see a picture. It didn't matter, and it started out with just sequences or a thematic thing, like Jenkins had a girl bouncing a ball, and if you could get that, you'd get a QSL card. You could send a QSL card back, and that made you, as a ham, his field test crew. And so that was how they got free field testing during the Depression. And then it went to small dramas and so on. And then regular show. We had regular shows in Chicago, for example, on a couple of the Sanabria stations. So that was when it started turning into more of an industry. They tried Clement Wade, the guy that started the the two Chicago stations and the Iowa City station and several others, the Milwaukee station. He was trying to commercialize television in the late 20s, early 30s. And it didn't work out, but he had his own manufacturing company in Waukegan. He bought a company and then he sold it, and it became Hallicrafters. It was Echophone at first, and then Hallicrafters.
And so the other thing I have an interest in is Nickelodeons.
Oh yeah,
Because those were even before radio and before television.
you have a Pan Orchestrion.
Not familiar with it.
That's the one that's got the drum on the top and a couple of, I think it was violins and piano and on the inside. It was amazing. I think that was a Wurlitzer.
Yeah, even the organs are amazing.
That thing was 7 feet tall, but I saw somebody got a hold of parts of those things and continued to expand them. And have you ever seen House on the Rock in Wisconsin?
No, I have not.
This guy, Jordan, built this crazy place, and it was just a giant collection in warehouses, and he turned it into a museum. And he's got all sorts of these things that are expanded. Some of them fill gigantic rooms. He's got the organ room where you're actually walking through an organ that's 3 stories tall, for example. And he's got another one where there's an octopus that's playing a quartet part with violins, cellos, and so forth, and playing them all together, with each arm going to one of these automatic instruments, electromechanical instruments. It's fascinating. And this thing goes on.
There's a castle in California called Scotty's Castle. And he wasn't the owner, but Scotty, who swindled the owner out of the money to build it. He had an organ delivered there that was actually linked to 2 or 3 grand pianos. So this organ could actually play the pianos in different parts of the house. And it also had an organ room where they had all the instruments. And I remember all the flaps in that room as dampers.
Oh yeah.
Dampers for the sound. And it was all very amazing stuff, But this is called Scotty's Castle in California, and in Death Valley, California. And it's an immaculate, it's a huge organ that unbelievable. It's out in the middle of the desert. They used to play it. I don't know if it's still